Okay, today in the reading, there was a discussion of the workshop model. And so I just wanted to take a brief, this will be a brief lecture on what exactly is the workshop model and let you see it in action a little bit by looking at some videos. So the workshop model is a model of engagement that is often used in the literacy classroom. It is something that you could use in your content area classes as well as in an ELA classroom. And we're going to just keep looking at this. So most students read less than 15 minutes per day. And so we want to think about what that means or what that implications are in our classroom. You know, students are in school for the majority of their waking time from Monday through Friday. We know that students are not reading. One of the ways or one of the areas of control that we have is to try to get them to read within our classroom. So we can do that. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a normed test that they do every couple of years. It's designed to help us to get sort of a longitudinal view on our progress in literacy, math. I think there's a science and maybe a social studies, a history exam. But with the literacy, the NAEP results show that students who read more frequently have higher scores. And that the score gap between frequent readers and infrequent readers gets bigger as they get older. That makes sense. Like anything, if you don't practice a skill, the skill declines. If you practice it, it's more automatic. So you start to see that gap improving. Among 9-year-olds, there was only an 18-point difference between children who reported reading never or hardly never and those who read almost every day. By age 13, that gap widened to 27 points. At age 17, it further increased to 30 points. So you can see the real consequence of, if we put this through an equity lens, now you see a real consequence of not reading. So one of the things that that we can think about is how we might be able to help our students to read, to have some choice and some more personalized education. And so in this infographic, what we see is what happens when we introduce a personalized learning model into students' literacy practices. What we saw is 4% increase in reading comprehension quizzes. We see greater growth. We see higher reading achievement. We see that they read more books. We see that they read more difficult books. And we see that they increase their time that they spend reading. So one of the things we want to think about is how can we personalize? Is it through choice, or are there some other ways that we might personalize our students' literacy learning? So another thing to think about is students in the top tercile, the top third of a reading skill, answered 70% more math and science questions correctly than students in the bottom tercile, even on questions with low reading difficulty. And what that tells us is reading really is a skill that will train the mind for analysis, for breaking down components, for thinking critically, for drawing synthesis. So even those classes that we wouldn't traditionally consider to be dependent upon reading, actually there's significant achievement that can be reached if we improve students' reading. So what is the reading workshop model? It's a model of instruction that focuses on the hard work, focuses on that work of the reader. The teachers model and then directly teach the skills that the student might need, that a proficient student might use, and then they give students practice time. So what does the lesson look like? Well, in a reading workshop lesson, the teacher might spend 10 to 15 minutes on a mini lesson. If I was in a social studies class, that mini lesson might be something related to reading primary source documents. In a science classroom, maybe we're looking at reading a graph or a lab report. It might be something like thinking about perspective taking or considering audience. But so you practice a mini skill, or in a mini lesson, you practice a skill. You give the students independent reading time. Then you go around and you conference with the students. You can give some focused practice to students that you notice are lagging, that are having difficulty, maybe you differentiate for the students that are that seem to be getting it by trying to add complexity, right? And then we put the students into groups and we give them a chance to kind of share out their reading. So let me show you this example of a think aloud, but that demonstrates it.
We're going to be looking at a passage, and I'm going to be looking at how authors use information to make a piece of history real. What type of sources they use, how do they create authenticity. One of the ways they do it is by giving actual accounts of people that lived during what happened in history. So I'm going to show you how I will read a passage and look for that, and then toward the end of class we'll get into small groups and you all can then practice seeing how an author uses different ways or devices to make a piece of history more real. So I'm thinking already the reading's going to be something about we've been studying here in class. So let me get started. The first thing I do as a reader when I look at something, and you all can look on because you all have this in front of you, is I don't dive right in. We're going to be looking at a passage, and I'm going to be looking...
Sorry. So you can see what he's doing is he's spending that initial time modeling and giving the students a specific strategy to look at, and then he's going to immediately give them practice time. So then the students are going to go into independent reading, where and in this you might consider offering choice to allow motivation and to improve cultural competence. So for instance, this was on, that was a primary source document. Perhaps you give them a number of primary source documents from several different time periods about several different topics so that they can, really kind of dive into something that is motivating for them. We want to consider that while the workshop model is something that is often done in ELAs when we're talking about full novel studies, it doesn't have to be. It can be very short. You can do something like a reading workshop with an article. And in fact, you could have a whole library together of articles for students that you could use related to topics. What you want to do is you want to give students a strategy. One or two things is all that you want to do. You want to focus them. You want to use a think aloud, a mini lesson to kind of help them to see what they're going to do. And then this is an example of what a check-in might look like. So then you are going to use some of your class time and they're just going to read right there in front of you. And I would give significant time. Don't have them do this just for 5 minutes. Give them 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on what you're reading. But as students are going in, you're going to document. You're going to be able to get some formative assessment here. You're going to have some check-ins. You're going to ask students questions. You might conference with students. You might correct students, right? This gives you an opportunity, and you might not get to everybody in one class period. So you might want something like this, a checklist that allows you to recognize who you've gone to see, maybe who is struggling. You can go back to the struggling students the next day, but then make sure that you're going to see some new students the next time you're doing a writing or reading workshop. So this is, allows you for a lot of formative assessment, allows you a lot of differentiation, but you're going to give your students that, 15 minutes or so, possibly more, to practice the skill. Then what happens is you want to put them into groups and you want them to have an opportunity to share out what they did or read. And so I'm going to show you a picture of a group here, a video of a group that's talking about a reading. And I want you to think about how this might be a good way to close out a reading workshop.
Do you guys know what a cloakroom is? A cloakroom? I know what a cloak is, but not a cloakroom.
Is it like where they keep all their jackets?
Or they like jackets,
like a space
yeah,
where
like
you put their jackets.
A room full of people for them to hang their coats.
Oh my god, yeah, I said it first.
Who cares? Do you guys know what a gristmill is?
No, I don't even know.
It's very similar to...
Is that even how you...
So what this was the specific strategy they're looking at was how to break down compound words. And so they all read different passages that had compound words, and then they shared out the words. So this is going to be a good way to do a closing.
Do you guys know what a cloakroom is?
So I just wanted, this is from last year. Let me just take this off. This slide is not. This is from last semester. There are definitely some challenges to doing the to doing this kind of instruction, you really want to make sure that you have high interest reading and activities, because if you're going to give the students this much independent work time, we're going to rely on their motivation, right, to help them focus. If it's really, really academic and not very relatable for the students, that independent reading time, you might have some compliance, but you're not really going to have active reading. You want to think about how you can integrate some more formal assessments, like perhaps thinking about writing reflections or analysis that is the product of their thinking and the group work. And you want to think about how you can orient your students towards goals, so how you can help them to see how this is related to the work that you're doing in your classroom. So the workshop model is certainly a model that you might consider using even in a content area classroom. It's a model that an ELA teacher might use quite a bit, and you might find some teachers that you can reach out to, but it is not just for ELA teachers, and I think it has a lot of value for teachers in the other disciplines. All right, thank you.